Thank you, and hello to everyone, and thank you for joining our session today, focused on the challenge of open and online education in North Macedonia. My name is Bardhyl Jashari. I'm the Executive Director of the Metamorphosis Foundation, and I have the honor to moderate this session. As an organization, Metamorphosis have promoted for years a culture of openness in education and research, and we strongly believe that producing sharing is the most efficient way of building knowledge and ensuring progress in society. That is worked for many years in projects related to open access to scientific content, open educational resources, and also on using licensing models that would create an enabling environment for open education and open science in our country. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our distinguished speakers today for this session that will last for 45 minutes, and each of the speakers will have 10 minutes to share their views, experience and opinions about what are the challenges related to open education, open science, and also online education in North Macedonia. I will start with Professor Zoran Janevski. He's the director of the Institute of Economics in Skopje, the St. Cyril and Methodius University. He's an experienced researcher and author in the field of entrepreneurship and e-business, but he's also have been a supporter of open education and open science for years in North Macedonia, and have worked with us and with Metamorphosis Foundation in many projects that are promoting and developing open education and open science. Professor Zoran will share with us his experience as a researcher, as a director of a research institute, and will tell us what are the challenges that are related to COVID, but not only, what are the challenges for science in our country. Please, Zoran, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bardhyl. So, good afternoon for everybody. As Bardhyl has just introduced me, I'm Zoran Janevski, and I'm professor and director of the Institute of Economics Skopje. The institute is one of 28 integral units, actually faculties and research institutes of the St. Cyril and Methodius University in Skopje in North Macedonia. And St. Cyril and Methodius University is the oldest, the biggest, and probably the best university in our country. What we are doing at our institute, our main focus is scientific research work. Since 1952, when the institute was founded as a public scientific institution, we are doing scientific research work in the field of economics and organizational science and management. And there are more than 500 projects in our portfolio. The institute also provides 8 master degree programs and 4 doctoral degree programs. What are our main challenges in providing our services in general, and how this global pandemic influence on them? So, as you probably know, scientific research mostly depends on several different elements, as funding, researchers, research infrastructure, public and private support, access to conferences, professional and scientific literature, electronic databases, repositories, and other things. And unfortunately, in North Macedonia, there are big challenges with all of them. For example, finding of science and research and development work is, I will say, miserable. For example, with 0.35% of GDP allocated on research and development in 2017 and 2018, our country is at the very bottom in Europe. Just for comparison, in Slovenia, which is very approximately country with almost the same population and area as North Macedonia, in 2018, they allocated 2% of their GDP on research and development, which is in total 50 times more money than we allocated. And Slovenia has only 5 times higher GDP than North Macedonia. And I must mention that the EU target is 3% of GDP to be allocated on research and development. The budget of the Institute of Economics Skopje is provided 70% by the Ministry of Education and Science, and 30% is from our own sources. At the 5 major public universities in North Macedonia in general, this structure is around 50% from the public funds and 50% from their own sources, which is not suitable concept at this moment at all. We are only 19 researchers at the Institute today, and there were more than 30, 10, 15 years ago. The government has no sense that we need young researchers, and it's very difficult to provide permits from the ministries to engage young researchers. It is almost impossible. And I will share the fact that at our institute, the salary of the full professor is less than 600 euros. There are no enough funds in our budget provided by the government for current expenses and investments in development of our research infrastructure. There are no funds dedicated to develop learning management systems, platform for online and distance learning, etc. In North Macedonia, 10, 15 years ago, the financing of scientific research projects stopped. One of the former ministers for education and research confessed that science and research was not between priorities in the government's programs for many, many years. Finally, there are some data owned and created by the public institutions in North Macedonia that are provided in open forms. But there are just few institutions that give some relevant and usable data suitable for our research work. So we use a lot of reports, news releases, studies, but not enough raw data that are available for research work for free. For example, if we need some raw data from the State Statistical Office or from the Central Register, we must go through a complicated procedure, and finally we must pay in front. Even despite these institutions are already funded by the government and their operations are already budgeted. What was also very indicative in the last several months since the COVID-19 pandemic has begun, no one from our government, from our ministries, asks from the most relevant public research institute to perform economic analysis and to create some measures and recommendations based on research how the Macedonian economy should deal with this crisis. So I'm asking myself and the general public, why we are funded even with this 70% of our budget when nobody from the government count on our expertise in the most sensitive period for the global economy. For the last 10, 15 years, our institute struggled to obtain stable funds to plan our research work. We try to sell the findings and knowledge gained from our research that are mostly financed by our own salaries. Also, very often, there are no funds dedicated for dissemination of our outcomes from our research work, for the fees and travel expenses to participate on conferences, for the expenses to publish our papers or books. That is why our colleagues are not ready to provide open access for free to the results from their research. So in my opinion, there are no basic preconditions for open science in North Macedonia. Unfortunately, I would be even more strict, and I would say that in North Macedonia, the conditions for doing science and research work are below any decent level. So COVID-19 pandemic or not, the future of science and research in North Macedonia, in my opinion, is certainly not bright at all.
Okay, Zoran, thank you for your presentation, and thank you for being very straightforward and real about how is the situation. And if I understood correctly, there is not much difference between the period before and after the COVID. The situation is bad. There is a evident lack of funding for the research community, and also the research infrastructure that would enable researchers to do their job in a more efficient way is also something that needs to be improved. And then to start and speak about open science and other stuff. Thank you very much. And let's continue now with Professor Džigal. He's currently working as a lecturer at the International Balkan University in Skopje within the Faculty of Communications, and he's teaching some of the courses related to new media theory, intercultural communication, history of digital media, etc. And he has been also working with us for several years on promoting open science and open education resources. And I'd be really happy to hear his view on what are the current challenges as a researcher, as a professor, but also as a current PhD candidate. Sead, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the introduction and the kind invitation. This is really interesting and very pressing issue. I'm glad that this sort of events, conferences, discussions are being organized. We are really living in complex, difficult times that will most probably reflect the way we should proceed and the way we will live in next few decades. So thanks again. I listened carefully to Zoran's presentation and discussion. In complement to that, I would like to give more focus or accent to the cultural, psychological issues that are in the focus or are of key importance regarding the COVID and education, scientific work, researches, and so on. So that will be my focus. What was the psychological impact? What were the main, let's say, issues that were that showed to be, let's say, most important from psychological and cultural aspect? So this all comes from my experience from the past semester working with colleagues at the faculty level, working with students. So my approach in this past semester during this pandemic period was positive. I was trying to encourage my students and colleagues to accept this as a sort of challenge that will, let's say, put us in situation to learn something new, to expand our skills, to see how can we, let's say, find new ways to do all things, teaching, exercises, doing presentations, and so on. But besides my positive approach, there were many, many challenges. So in general, most of the teachers, not all, most of the teachers and dominant number of students didn't like online classes or online lectures. So I was in with my researching mind and my scientific patience. I was trying to know and to pick up all these reasons and motivations behind this, let's say, this dominant attitude, negative attitude towards online teaching, online lectures, and other online, let's say, activities at faculty level. So one for sure is the stress factor. That means living in a time pandemics forces you to do things that are unusual, new, maybe something that you didn't plan, you are not prepared for, and so on. So the stress factor was one of course, important reasons that this general negative approach was persistent. The second one, in the, let's say, on the side of my colleagues, the teacher staff, the academic staff, is the age gap. Some of the teachers do have, let's say, this resistance towards new technologies. They have some basic level skills and so on. They can do some things with the online tools, with the hardware, with the tablets, with the laptops and so on. But they have this negative attitude towards technology. So that was apparent. My older colleagues had stronger resistance towards online lectures and so on. Of course, this is connected and related also with computer literacy. So in order to handle all these things, you need to have developed computer literacy skills. It's not only to switch on your cameras and to talk to the students. You have many options that cause some sort of confusion in the academic stuff, like how to, let's say, switch on the presentation, use some software tools, get students into interactive activities, and so on. So these are some of the main reasons, negative reasons for, let's say, a resistance towards online teaching. On the part of the students, I noticed some different, let's say, aspects or motives or factors. One of them is, for them, it was very hard to switch on. I call this digital disruption or some sort of disruption, where they treat these tablets, laptops, and so on, tools for entertainment and fun, and let's say some other activities related to socializing, social media, and so on. So it was very hard for them to use the same tools that they use for their TikToks and Instagrams and so on, to use it for serious academic work. So on that side, there was some resistance to switch on in this online lecturing mode, and that was apparent in my discussions with them and so on. Second main, let's say, aspect that I discovered was this problem with attention span. It is very hard and difficult to retain or remain the attention of the students in the classroom. During the online lecture, this is even harder challenge. So how to, I notice after 20, 25, 30 minutes, their attention is decreasing, and it is very hard for them to concentrate and to listen entirely. According to the program, we had, let's say, huge blocks of lectures, like 2+2, 2 classes of theory, 2 plus of exercise. So 4 hours of online lecturing is too much. So we were trying to deal with these practical aspects of online lectures and to help students, let's say, give them easier approach to the lectures and study materials that they were supposed to learn. So I don't have, let's say, a standard set of solutions. I just recognize this as a challenge, as something that should be explored, researched, paid attention to, and use some, let's say, solutions, so to say, but giving breaks, breaking the lecture with a discussion, showing a video and so on, giving them a task, exercise and so on. So this, the so-called Zoom fatigue or online lecture fatigue is one very important factor that we should explore more. And the third point would be, let's say, the tools that they need to use. This relates to presentation by Zoran. Many of the students, they have limited digital tools, devices on, unstable internet connections. Most of them try to follow lectures through mobile phone connections, and this also bears a lot of expenses on their, let's say, modest budgets, student budgets and so on. So this is also an issue that is a strong factor. And so, of course, not everything is negative. They, on the side of the students, they had, let's say, they recognize some positive aspects, like they don't have to go to the faculty to spend 3 hours there and so on. They can switch on and follow the lecture 5 minutes after they wake up and so on, or prepare shortly. Also, some of them, yes, welcomed online discussions and other, let's say, ways of joining the class activities and so on. So some of my recommendations, this is limited, cannot be standardized, but let's say they are some proposal for or recommendations for North Macedonia at least, is to have, I would call it mandatory online classes even after pandemics. Let's say in the faculty or academic curriculums, there should be certain percentages, whether it is 5, 10%, 20%, depends on the faculty, depends on the university and so on. There should be a certain percentage of mandatory online classes for students, through which both the teaching staff and students would be able not only to practice, but let's say to get into this different mode of teaching and let's say so on. So this would enable both sides, lecturers, teachers, and the students to, let's say, to adapt or to include these skills, improve their skills in online teaching. Second is, recommendation is to have regular trainings for teaching staff. So there's always, even for the more skilled colleagues or academicians, there's always, let's say, space for improvement, and regular trainings should be something that should be organized by the system, the ministries and other, let's say, educational institutions, but also by civic sector. This should be helped by some sort of projects, having trainings, introducing different aspects, both of software, both of digital tools and so on. With Bardhyl and Metamorphosis, I had a really great opportunity to work on this, developing free education materials and education materials with open access and so on. So this is something that now in time of pandemics is getting even higher or greater importance. So developing these open education resources, something that should be available to all professors, teaching staff online. And trainings should also familiarize them, how to use them, how to find them, how to submit their own, how to contribute. And so I think my time is expiring, so I would finish that. Also, one of the main challenges, at least for our region or for North Macedonia, is developing education tools. That means providing not only these electronic materials and books, but also software in different languages, especially because the language aspect is very important for North Macedonia, multilingual, multicultural society. So this all requires a lot of work. So getting back to one of my introducing thoughts is that this is a very complex issue. We should not be discouraged by some initial problems, issues, and so on. We should work very diligently and in coordination with all sectors of society, academic, community, the state institutions, international organizations, and I'm very glad that this is also on international level, cooperate and exchange ideas and experiences with other academic institutions in the region. I would finish this, but I will certainly join the discussion later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Seth, and thank you for giving another perspective on the challenges that we are facing and really focusing on how this entire situation with COVID requires everybody, not only the professors, the academics, but also the students and everyone involved in the education process to change the mindset and also the challenges related to the practical aspects and how to use technology, how to adapt educational content, how to access, etc. Thank you very much. And so I would like now to introduce my colleague Goce Arsovski. He's project officer and researcher at Metamorphosis Foundation. He's involved in research activities of the foundation, and he always applies his research background in marketing and data analytics to the project of the Metamorphosis Foundation. We have just lately worked on a research, and Goce was leading the process to see what are the challenges to online education on primary level. And I invite Goce to present them, and then we will have a discussion with everyone. Goce, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bardhyl. Also, thanks to the organizers for this invitation, for this excellent opportunity to present our case. I'll just like to link to what Sead just said. For our attendees, I hope that attention span does not wear out during our long talks. So I have a lot of data to show you. I have, as Bardhyl said, we just finished the very important research on elementary schools in North Macedonia. So I have a lot of numbers to show you, so bear with me. Just a quick overview. What Sead and Zoran talked about relates mainly to adults, relates to faculty, to university levels where even, let's say, that attention span should and probably is a bit higher. So what we did with this research is focus on the elementary level, or focus on adolescents, how they perceived, how they saw the challenges with online education, and also the teachers and the school management. So I'll just share my screen now, give you the overview. So okay, can you see the screen presentation? Okay, so
yes, it's
fine. So the research is called "The Challenges and State of the Online Education in Primary Schools in North Macedonia." So our goal was to identify the challenges and the state of said education during the mandatory online education period. So in North Macedonia, I think it was March 10th when the schools officially closed, and every teaching had to be online. So until the end of the school year. So we had two sources of data. One was an anonymous online survey, and the other was 3 focus groups. So the online survey was done using Google Forms, and we had 757 participants in the study. Almost 90% of those participants were teachers. So you can see the graph. We had part of the management teams, so the directors and stuff, and we had part of the professional services team, so psychologists and the like. So from those almost 90% of participants, almost 90% of those are female teachers. So this was an expected, let's say, result, because more for better or worse, traditionally in our educational systems, I believe even in the region, not just in North Macedonia, teaching, especially at the primary schools, at the elementary schools, is seen as a somewhat female profession. So you can see the graph for yourself. Only about 10% of teaching staff reported they're males. Another interesting thing to note, also to what Sead said about the digital competencies, the literacy, the readiness to adopt technology, to adopt new tools, is age related, of course. So you can see that it's especially important, like only about 12%, 11.9, yeah, there it is, are aged up to 35 years old. So even to what Zoran said, we have a very small group of young researchers, or relatively young researchers, and also that replicates even to the primary education in the context of teaching staff. So yeah, almost a third of our participants reported they do not have state mandated internet access at the schools. So they relied solely on their private cell phones connections, their data connection. So that's a lot. So 1/3 of all teaching staff. Half of the teaching staff, almost half of the teaching staff reported using private personal laptops and teaching aids that they acquire for themselves, for their private needs, and they have to use those in online education. Almost all of the teaching staff reported using solely private emails and official correspondence. I mean, official correspondence in terms of grading the students, receiving their, I don't know, photos, homeworks and stuff like that. Even when communicating in cases with the ministry, with the official institutions. So this is worrisome, let's say, to a degree, especially the last point with the emails. And I have to remind even some of my colleagues from time to time that when we talk about elementary schools, we're talking about adolescents, we're talking about persons under the age of 18, which their data is highly sensitive. And in many cases, when giving homework to these students, like very young children, teachers require them to send photos, for example, to film themselves, or the parent to film the student doing the assignment. So that is all very sensitive data. Almost all of the respondents on our research vehemently agreed that continued technical support of the teaching staff is necessary in order for this online education experiment, let's say, to succeed. So even the parts of the respondents that were not teaching staff agreed with this statement. I think also Sead mentioned in one of his remarks that this is a key point, that you can't just hold a training on, like, let's say 30% of the teaching staff and just hope that will trickle down to their colleagues and everyone will have a successful, effective online education process. So everyone I spoke to, and this project has been going on for a while, as Bardhyl mentioned. So the main complaint of everyone involved in this is that teachers are not ready in general, technically ready. I mean, so we see this as a major issue. Also, most of the teaching staff, like 82.4% and 85%, had issues with the state's guidelines, had issues with the scoring, with the grading of homeworks. Where do they keep the grades? How do they make sure that, for example, not every grade is visible to every student or parent or etc. So there, again, this is more technological, let's say, challenge, which can be resolved via using an effective software, let's say. Another major talking point I just want to throw there is that not every student was impacted equally. This is very important, at the heart of what we do. So there are still areas in North Macedonia where internet access is scarce, and there are schools without internet access, with none of the IT infrastructure. That not that those that have it is some high-tech solutions, but still there are some that they are totally lacking. So this is a problem even pre-COVID, of course. This is not something that happened during the past couple of months, but the differences that these students, the difference in the quality of education that these students receive, even pre-COVID and now especially, only exacerbated the fact that when they get out of the system, when they finish middle school, so in North Macedonia, it's mandatory by law you have to finish middle school, high school. So when they get out of that system, the differences between someone getting their education in a more, let's say, rural area, or speaking a language of a minority group is different than Macedonian, and it has a deep divide. So almost half of the respondents said they believe there's enough educational resources on all the teaching languages used in North Macedonia, which is also worrisome because this is a very well-known fact among researchers, among people working in education, in the education sector, educational reform. There is far from enough educational resources available for minorities. And just as a contrast, 70% of the teaching staff that teaches in a language different than Macedonian, exclusively or mixed, does not agree with this statement. So, but yeah, that just shows the lack of understanding among let's call them more economically advanced areas, like urban areas, the capital Skopje, for example, with the more rural-based teachers, staff, and students. In order for online education, sorry, Bardhyl, you wanted to?
Okay, no, I'll just say that one more minute, please, Goce, because we are running out of time.
Okay, I'll just keep right. Okay, so there was a lot of talk about using an online platform, and our ministry is currently rolling out that platform for the new school year. So we had a lot of tension in the summer. Are we going to use a one platform or not? A third of staff reported that they think that giving certain freedoms to the school and the teaching staff is much better than using a unified platform for online education. However, almost everyone agrees that at least partial or full complete adaptation of textbooks and related educational materials has to be made. There has to be changes and reforms in way teaching is done. To note what Sad said, it's not enough to turn on the webcam, the microphone, and just read out loud from the textbook. Online education is much more than that. This is a graph showing how the teaching staff felt prepared or unprepared back in March. So you can see more of them felt prepared somewhat, but still a large percentage of 41%, admittedly knowing this is anonymous, but still the anonymous survey still reported they were not ready. Teachers in North Macedonia believe in their, let's call them more basic digital literacy skills and ICTs like Microsoft Word, browsing, PowerPoints, using Skype, Zoom, etc. But the more advanced tools like Google Classroom, Edmodo, using cloud storage, etc., are lacking. So lacking in skills. Teachers, to a large extent, believe and require constant trainings for different things, but not just the technological aspects. When it comes to pedagogy, most of teachers feel that trainings aimed at online teaching, proper communicating with parents as well. It was a major challenge, maintaining the students' discipline, attention span, again, encouraging student participation. It was a major pain in the past months. Okay, sorry for taking more of the time. This is the last. When we asked them, what do you think? What is the approximate percentage of students actually following this online education experiment? Yeah, you can see the results for yourself. 60% claimed between 50 and 90% were online and engaged, but official numbers are yet to be released by our institutions. So we have a lot of recommendations. I can just direct you to our website, metamorphosis.org.mk. You can read much more about that on our website, oar.mk. Metamorphosis Foundation, as Bardhyl said, is always open to collaboration with representative representative from the region, faculties, individuals, organizations, everyone who advocates for quality education for all students. Okay.
Thank you, Goce. Thank you very much. And just briefly, so we can notice that we are facing the academic community, the scientists, educators are facing challenges in Macedonia at all levels. So I can see here that we have already 2 questions. So the first one is from Sue Gardner, and I will read it. So just to make sure that you have access to the questions. So the question is, do you feel that libraries in your institutions are able to adequately support your work? So Zoran or Sead, if you can answer briefly this question, it would be great.
I think Zoran is most competent about this issue. He briefly mentioned this aspect.
I will share our experience from our institute. Actually, we are not prepared to work remotely at all, not just our library, but we are not prepared in the sense that most of our colleagues are not, they don't have enough digital skills, and they're not familiar with platforms suitable for teamwork. And actually, that's why I'm saying that the research infrastructure is mostly analog in North Macedonia, especially when I'm talking about the public sector, research institutions funded by the government. And actually, that is a very important aspect of our work. We must change our practices. We must start thinking that especially our critical data, our critical sources, our critical information for our research work, we must try to keep them in digital way, in a digital form, and probably on a cloud, in order to be in a situation that it could be accessed from any IT means, mobile phones, laptops, or any other IT infrastructure. So the short answer is that we are not able. Sorry?
No, please. Just I wanted to try to focus on the role. What do you think libraries can play in particular? Do you think that they can and they should play a more important role in order to support your institutions to do your work?
Library they should start actually their digital transformation, as well as the whole educational and research system in our country. So we participate in only few digital repositories of scientific papers and libraries, because we have no funds to pay for the fees for the access of those digital sources. And probably someone must take this in consideration and try to support our work, even with providing more and wider access to digital libraries, to digital repositories, and other sources of data, studies, information, books, etc.
Okay, thank you, Zoran. There is another question from Diana, and the question is, are there any similar studies in Croatian schools, similar to the study that Goce just presented? And the question is for Goce, but also for anyone that is aware that there is such a study. Personally, I'm not aware that there is such a study for Croatian school, but Goce, if you know anything about any similar survey or research, please let us know.
Okay. Yeah. Unfortunately, I do not know any Croatian studies of this scope. So maybe someone in the audience or fellow organizers can point us to that. But I believe that this is this whole digital transformation that also Zoran just mentioned with the libraries, etc. This spans decades. This spans even from former Yugoslavia, where teachers were seen as one-stop shop for every educational need for every student, and they had once you get a job as a teacher, especially elementary teacher, it's basically your textbook, yourself, and the blackboard. So a lot of them. So I'm in reference to the questioning about Croatian schools, I would be very surprised if the situation is drastically better. Let's call it like that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Are there other questions from the audience, or we can just finish the session? So if there are no other questions, I would once again like to thank our speakers, and also to thank the audience for taking the time to listen to the challenges related to open and online education in North Macedonia. And I hope that the presentations from our speakers will motivate us to cooperate more and also help each other to overcome all those challenges that are not related to COVID, but also are related to the usage of technology in the educational process at all levels. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.